Welcome back to the Bigger Than Birth podcast, where we're celebrating bigger bodies and beautiful births. I'm your host, Victoria Gaba, and each week we will be bringing you the real stories of plus-size moms as they share their journey through fertility, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. These stories highlight what it's like to navigate through this experience as a woman in a bigger body in hopes of creating representation for plus-size moms, both present and future. Thank you for being part of this community as we share these stories that are so much bigger than birth. Welcome to today's show. In today's episode, we are joined by Nikki, a mother of two from South Georgia who shares her experience navigating the medical system in a larger body. Nikki shares her first pregnancy story where she weighed over 500 pounds and faced the jarring reality of being fired by her OB-GYN practice at only 12 weeks due to her size and the associated risk that they thought they would have. Despite being told that her weight made her high risk, Nikki successfully navigated a 4-day induction, which ended in a vacuum-assisted vaginal delivery. We also discussed Nikki's second pregnancy, which followed a 200-pound weight loss after bariatric surgery. Nikki explains the unique medical considerations for bariatric patients, from glucose monitoring challenges to restrictions on medication, and how she achieved a remarkably smooth second vaginal delivery. From advocating for bariatric-size hospital gear to surviving severe hyperemesis twice, Nikki's story is a masterclass in self-advocacy and a great reminder that body size does not define your birth outcome. Let's dive into Nikki's story. Hey, Nikki, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Hello, I am very happy to be here.
Well, we're super excited to have you and to get to hear both of your birth stories. So before we get started, I guess we will jump in and have you tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and where y'all are living.
Yes, so my name is Nikki. I have been with my husband for almost 12 years. We live in a really small South Georgia town. Nobody has ever heard of it, but it's like almost Florida, but not quite, but definitely not Atlanta. We have two little ones. We have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old.
So y'all are in the toddlerhood age right now.
Very much so. My oldest is special needs, so those come with its own special, unique set of life experiences.
Absolutely. But why don't we start with your oldest? Were y'all planning to conceive her when you did?
So yes, and so we knew that we wanted kids after we had been married for at least a year. My husband was really big on it. I want that first year to just enjoy my wife. And then we bought this 5-bedroom house with no kids. And I told our realtor, that's going to be my kid's room. And so is that one. And she was like, are you pregnant? I was like, no.
No, we're just planning ahead here.
we know it's gonna happen. And while it took, I'd say, longer than expected, but I wouldn't say we had infertility challenge because it didn't take a year. And so I know there's very specific wordings regarding like what's infertility, but I think like 4 months in, I asked our doctor, I was like, okay, well, what can we do? Can we look and check something? What's going on?
Right. I feel like once you get into that, it's like any month that it doesn't happen, it feels so long. You're like, okay, next month. Okay, next month.
Yes.
So you said it took about 4 months total for y'all to fall pregnant?
Like closer to like 6 to 8 months time frame. I went and finally found an OB, and it was a whole thing of, hey, I need to find a doctor who works with, I use fat. So I need to find a doctor who works with fat patients. This is really important, and reached out to find recommendations. And finally found someone, and I was like, well, what if it's because of my weight? And she was like, let's be honest. She was like, being fat isn't the issue as by itself. And those were her exact words. She was like, oftentimes there are other underlying items, but that alone is never the issue. And when she said that, I was like, oh, I like you. I want to keep you. I didn't keep her, but that is a later story for the podcast. I didn't end up keeping her, but she found me a place that did, I can't think of the scan, but they go in and they like look to see if your eggs are all in there. And the lady told me that doctor, it was a separate doctor. She's like, you have too much fat. We can't see your ovaries. You probably aren't ovulating. And that was the month that I got pregnant.
So you're like, thank you, ma'am, for that positivity you put out into the world.
Yes.
That's crazy. So obviously when they did the scan, were they able to see anything, or they just kind of cut you off from the beginning?
They cut me off. They just shut it down. Like they went in and looked and they're like, nope, there's too much fat. We can't see anything.
That's wild. And do you mind sharing at what weight did you start kind of that journey, and then when you found out you were pregnant?
So that I was probably like 5'10". So about 510 pounds. And then when I got pregnant, I was 530. And I stayed there almost the whole pregnancy.
So when they said, "Hey, we're not able to do your scan," was that a little bit discouraging, or did you go back to that OB and be like, "Okay, what next?"
Didn't our follow-up appointment was a few weeks after, and I told her, I was like, they put it in, they looked, they said it was too much fat, and she was like, "What? I don't understand." And we found out shortly after I was pregnant, and that's where we get into like the early part of the pregnancy. This doctor was amazing, but it was a clinic of for women. And to be a part of this clinic, and I didn't know this at a time, when you're pregnant, they have to have a 75% agreement rate on all of their patients. So, in order for them to keep a pregnant patient, 3 out of 4 have to agree to that patient. Well, my doctor calls me in and she's like, "Hey, we have to talk." And at this point, I was 11 or 12 weeks, and I was like, What are we talking about?"
Right, that's never
Um,
words you wanna hear. That's, like, nerve-wracking anyways. Like, is it something with the
yeah.
baby? Is it something going on?
Yes. And so keeping in mind at this time, I had previously been diagnosed with atrial fibrillation, which is a heart condition. I saw maternal fetal medicine really early in my pregnancy, and they said, everything's fine. We'll keep an eye on it, but we have no reason to see you long term. That was maternal fetal medicine. It's like, besides your weight, there's no other issues. You can see your regular OB. So my OB pulls me into a room. She looks really sad and despondent. It was kind of weird for her because she's really upbeat. She was like, "Hey, we have this thing. We have to have a 75% agreement rate. I'm the only one comfortable proceeding with your care. Because of your weight, the other doctors don't want to take the risk." And I was like, they don't want to take the risk. I don't think I understand what you mean." She was like, "Well, we all have to agree, at least for 3 of us. And if we can't come to that agreement, we have to transfer your care." And I was like, "So do you find me someone?" And she was like, "Well, you can just go to maternal fetal medicine." And I explained to her, "Well, they said they don't need to see me full time, that there's no issues." She's like, "I know, I'm sorry." And she was like, "I can walk you out the back." So instead of even walking me out because I was bawling.
Yeah,
So
I
she
can
walks
walk
me
you out
out
the
of the
back?
back. So she walks me out the back so I don't have to see the doctors or the nurses. She didn't charge me for the visit because we didn't do anything else that entire visit. The visit was just for her to fire me, basically. And so I had to see maternal fetal medicine the entire rest of my pregnancy, which is also weird because they don't deliver babies. So you go see them for care, but the person who delivers you is just whoever is on staff at the hospital. And you won't know who it is until you get there that day.
Right.
I cried about it for weeks, and my mom was like, "Well, let's think about it this way. If they aren't comfortable with your care, would you be comfortable with them seeing you knowing that they're constantly thinking about what's going to happen?"
Yeah, and it's gonna disrupt your peace of mind anyway, so that's a good way to look
Yes.
at
She
it.
was like, "Do you really want someone delivering your child who is scared that they're going to ruin something?"
Yeah, that's definitely concerning and super hard. Like you said, they weren't willing to help you find another provider or give you any more resources. It was just kind of like cut our losses and move on. That's really hard.
Mhm. And it puts a mark on your record. So we'll continue on to the first pregnancy, but when I got pregnant with my second, I called a OB's office that was in the same like hospital network as them. At this point, I had lost 170 pounds, and they were like, "Hey, because you saw maternal fetal medicine with your last pregnancy, you still have to go to them again. We can't see you." And I was like, "Why didn't you tell me this before I made the appointment?" I was only 6 weeks pregnant at the time, so really early, just trying to get an initial appointment. And they're like, "No, we can't see you because this is already on your record that you're high risk." And I was like, "Even though everything was fine?" They were like, "Yeah, even though everything was fine." And I was like, "Well, could y'all have told me that on the phone before I drove up here?"
That is crazy. And we'll get into that too, but that's a little bit wild. So,
Mhm.
once you did start going to maternal fetal medicine, kind of the early part of your pregnancy, were you having any other symptoms or how did that first part of pregnancy go?
So I can never say the second word, but I had hyperemesis gravid. I threw up constantly, nonstop, and didn't matter if I ate, it was coming back up. And so they were really helpful there. And I guess ultimately, I guess the only positive about seeing maternal fetal medicine is you do get an ultrasound every visit. So I was at least able to see the baby every single visit. And we have to caveat this was peak 2020. So my daughter was born May 2020. So during this time, you're also dealing with the pandemic. Early on, things were fine. My husband could come to the appointments, but suddenly, oh, nobody else can come to this appointment. Hey, sit in your car and wait before you come in. So you're also dealing with those things on top of.
Yeah, and that's pregnancy early on is anxiety inducing enough, let alone the whole world pandemic going on. So I'm sure that was a scary time.
Yes.
For your HG, did you have to go in to do any like IV infusions or did that kind of trickle down as it got later in your pregnancy?
I just took a whole lot of medicines. They weren't doing infusions at the time because it wasn't considered life threatening and it was COVID. So if it's not a life threatening thing, they're not having you come do anything.
Got it. So what medications did end up working for you or was it just kind of band-aid the situation?
Wish I could remember the name of it, but all I remember is that the pills have little storks on them. The actual nausea medication. So we did Zofran, I did Diclegis, which is just Unisom plus B6, but this particular medicine is made for morning sickness and hyperemesis. I want to say it's like promethazine or something, but I also think promethazine is something from a rap song. So that also might
We'll,
not be right.
we'll look into it.
But it had little storks on it, and which I thought was the cutest.
And that helped you kind of subside that sickness?
I still threw up after every meal, but not every couple of hours. I
That's
absolutely
good.
could not eat without throwing up. And at that point, I was like, well, I'll just eat what I want and then it'll just,
Right, it's not gonna stay anyways. So, as you got into 2nd and 3rd trimester, did that kind of persist through there or it ended up
It
going away?
did. It
Mm,
persisted the entire time. And the thing about having it while also fat is they don't always consider it hyperemesis if you're not also losing weight. And so I started documenting every time I was throwing up to show her, hey, I'm throwing up 15 to 25 times every single day. No, the weight hasn't changed, but like this still is not normal. And I need you to
right.
hear me when I say this. And so one of the nurses was finally like, no, you're right. It is hyperemesis.
Right, because even if you're not losing weight, you're not able to soak in all the nutrients of the food you're eating if you're throwing up constantly.
Yes. And so that's kind of sometimes the battle of like, hey, yes, I'm fat, but also these two things aren't correlated at this time.
Right. And being able to advocate for yourself of like, "Hey, something's going on. Please look into this."
And advocating alone because spouses were not allowed at any visits.
Was he able to, like, FaceTime when you would have your ultrasounds or something, or was it just you that
Yes,
entire time?
he did. I think he was only able to come into 2 or 3 ultrasounds, but that's because it was pre-March when everything shut down. So any that were before March were fine and he attended, but once the world shut down in March, it was over. So even like that, the detailed ultrasound, which the name of them is skipping my mind right now,
The
couldn't come
anatomy
to that.
scan?
He couldn't come to the anatomy scan.
Yeah.
But also I did do sneak peek at like 8 weeks for both my pregnancies because I am very impatient. And I know sneak peek gets a bad rap, but it was right for me both times. Especially when you think about NIPT tests, both pregnancies did it multiple times due to weight. It's really hard to get a fetal fraction that is high enough to actually get NIPT results. And both times I was warned this and told, hey, it may be harder. And very much so, both times it did not happen. So it'd say the fetal fraction is too low, and the doctors would say, yeah, it's due to your weight. It can't pick up a high enough fetal fraction. So, which is always interesting to me. Hey, how does Sneak Peek manage? And it's because Sneak Peek is only looking for the sex marker.
Mm,
It doesn't need as high of a fetal fraction because it's not looking for all the other things.
got it. Well, that's good to know because I know a lot of OBs are automatically like, "Oh, you need this NIPT testing," but to understand that sometimes it might not be reliable depending on your weight.
Yeah, and it just comes back void. It won't work. It did not work. And I did it twice with my first pregnancy and only once with my second because it was at that point we get why.
Yep, for sure. So talk us through as you get towards the end of your pregnancy. So you were still seeing MFM. What were the conversations like as far as what to look for? Were they talking about induction? How did that go?
Yeah, so one of the things they were like, okay, you have to take aspirin for high blood pressure. I was like, hey, I don't have high blood pressure. And they're like, yeah, but we want to watch out for it just in case. I did the gestational diabetes test 3 times. So they made me do it at 12 weeks. Everything was fine. They made me do it again at 22 weeks. Everything was fine. And then they had me do it again at 30 weeks and everything was fine. And they were like, well, you're at higher risk for gestational diabetes because of your weight, which technically you're not because it's all about the placenta in the first place. But they're like, well, we just want to make sure. And I did not have gestational diabetes. I got high blood pressure the very, very end. And so we did induce at 36 weeks, but I was on my way home from a doctor's appointment May 9th because my daughter was born May 15th and a car ran into me on the way home.
My
And so
gosh.
I leave the doctor's appointment and have to go straight back to the emergency room. I was like, I just left here. I think I'm fine. And everything was perfectly fine. And so we did induce at 37 weeks. It was 4 days long. It took a really long time. But the doctor, when I met him, I looked him square in the face and I said, I need you to promise me you're not going to give me a C-section because I'm fat. And he was like, huh? I said, I need you to say it out loud that you will not give me a C-section because I'm fat. And he said, okay. And he was like, we want to limit you having to undergo major surgery at your weight anyway. We would like to avoid that at all costs. I was like, well, you're one of the first people who say that.
So what was their reasoning for the induction at 37? Was it your blood pressure?
Because I have the history of AFib, they didn't want to go past 37 weeks. And so I had an AFib flare up one time in 2018 and it never ever happened again. And so at that point it was still on my records as having it, even though it never occurred again. It was like a fluke. But I guess I had sleep apnea. So at that point they're like, well, it could happen again. Let's just do the induction. And I was like, I mean, at least I'll know when the baby's coming. We went in May 12th and she was born the 15th. So that is for record, like how long that
Yeah.
took. My doula wasn't allowed to come.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So COVID, only one person. And doulas aren't considered medical staff. So it
So
could
was
only
just
be
your
that one
husband?
person. Yes. So she was there on FaceTime when necessary, but that was it.
Wow. It's so hard to look back because it feels like so long ago, but the fact, like, of everything going on with COVID and then using that in, like, the giving birth lens is, like, I can't even imagine. Like, what a
Yes,
crazy time.
so many people in my due date Facebook groups were having to give birth with a mask on. So we didn't have that issue as long as it was just us in the room. Nobody had to wear a mask. And he had to wear one if others came in, but I did not. But we were both tested beforehand too.
So as you go in for your induction, what was kind of the first steps that they took there? Were you dilated at all, or did they have to give you, like, cervical ripening?
I was at 0 when we went in. It was actually awful. And I say it being awful, just being at 0 and starting from scratch and not understanding because I had told all of my friends, I was like, yeah, she'll be here today. I'm going in today. And my coworkers were like, uh-huh, sure.
Sure.
So when I went in, we went in at 8 p.m. and I was at 0. 0 efface, 0 dilation. We started with misoprostol and I got it every 4 hours. By the time the morning came, I had only moved to like a 0.5. So like we were moving really, really, really slow. And so about 24 hours later, they were like, okay, let's do a Foley Blue. That was the most painful part of childbirth to me than anything else. And I had no idea what I was supposed to be expecting. My mom can't be there. And finally at like 3 o'clock, I was like, all right, can we get this epidural here? Now, the guy who did the epidural, anesthesiologist, we won't say that guy. At first, he kept like struggling to put it in. And he was like, there's just too much fat here. And he kept trying. And he was a younger guy. You could tell he was new. We were probably about the same age. And I think I was like 25. Nope, 27. And it fell out. Like the needle fell out of my back. About 2 a.m. on the 15th, they sent in the head anesthesiologist to come and re-put it in. And it was fine. He had no issues finding the spot. He had no issue putting it in. It was completely normal.
So did you have it in, like, for a period of time? Was it working and giving you medicine, or he wasn't able to get it in from the
He put it
beginning
in.
anyways? Yeah.
And at some point, it felt like the whole needle came out and had to
That's
be fully
crazy.
reinserted. It was so painful that very first time. I don't know what he was doing. He says it was due to fat, visceral fat. So I guess loose fat. And so at this point, we're like 48 hours in. It's the morning of, and it wasn't until like 6:50 that morning where we're like 100% everything. So I'm going to say it was like 6:50, 7 o'clock. She didn't come until 10. So that entire time we were just pushing for 3 hours. For 3 hours straight, there's like 5 people in the room, doctors, nurses. And I tell the doctor, I was like, okay, we could just do a C-section. I can't push anymore. And he was like, you told me you didn't want one. You told me under no circumstances am I to give you an unnecessary C-section. He was like, is that not what you told me?
You're like, "Sir, this is not the moment for I told you so."
And I'm like, well, yes, but and he was like, we can try vacuum, we can try tongs is the wrong word for that, but we can try those. And okay, we can try the vacuum. She came at 1 o'clock. So we were at 100 at 7 a.m. We started pushing about 9:30 or 10. She didn't come until 1.
Wow. And did you have breaks in between that, like, to let your body just take a minute, or
No,
that
we
was
were
full
pushing for
pushing?
3
Oh.
hours straight. Like 3 hours straight. And that's at this point, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Just cut it out. And they're like, she's too low. We can't just cut her out now. Cause like I could feel her head like pop out, but then it'd go back. So they used a vacuum and finally got it done.
So when they pulled her out, did they just immediately able to put her on your chest, or what were those first moments like?
Yeah, so they were immediately able to give her to me. They put her right on my chest. There were no issues with her. And they immediately went to like placenta delivery. Hey, we have to give you stitches. This is going to hurt. We're just giving you a heads up. I had a 3rd-degree tear, which absolutely sucks.
And was your epidural still intact at that point, or because it had been so long, was there no pain
It
relief?
was it was still working, but they immediately gave me something stronger. I don't know what they gave me, but I do know they ended up giving me something stronger
Oh.
in the process. But they did almost immediately take it out. So I was like, hey, I gotta pee. And that is when they realized that nobody ever put a catheter in.
Oh my gosh, with your epidural.
Yes.
Oh
So
gosh.
yeah, it was at that moment that they were like, oh, we never gave you one. And I didn't realize until later when I was telling someone the story and they made the same face that you just did, that they were supposed to put it in before they did it.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's part of it too, because they say, like, if you're going through labor, you're supposed to pee every, whatever, 30 minutes so the baby gets in the right position. So I wonder if that was part of it too, like blocking her from going down.
I didn't think about that because they did have to like manually go in because I couldn't walk yet. And they're like, hey, we have to take that pee out before your bladder bursts. So we're gonna do that now.
At that point, like, were you even paying attention to much, or were you just focused on
I
on
wasn't
baby?
paying attention to anything. I wasn't really in pain, so I guess the epidural worked, and they were still consistently kind of administering pain meds and aspirin and all the things. But while it was a long, very long experience, it was fine. The tear was probably the worst part of it all, and the epidural.
So talk us through those early days of postpartum. How long did y'all stay in the hospital?
We stayed 2 nights, but I ended up with this really bad migraine. And bad is probably the wrong word. Every sound made my head throb. Every single sound. It didn't matter what it was. And I have a history of migraines, but they were really worried about it. So they called a neurologist while I was in the hospital. And the day after, so we went home on the 17th, they said, hey, can you come in for a CT scan like now? Keeping in mind, nobody else can come. The baby can't come. My husband can't come. So I am 2 days postpartum having to drive myself to go get this CT scan with a baby at home with COVID happening in the world. And the CT scan literally showed nothing. So the neurologist happened to be 9 months pregnant at the time. And she was like, we're going to figure out what's causing this. But for now, I'm going to give you, I don't know what kind of cocktail it was, but it got rid of it. She's like, we just trying to make sure there's nothing bleeding, like there's not anything wrong because it happened so fast. And so there are the caveats of, hey, I'm a fat mom giving birth, but I'm also Black. And so acknowledging the intersection of those two things, they wanted to make sure nothing was going wrong postpartum either. And so we still never figure out what caused that awful migraine that day, but whatever she gave me worked and I could actually function. So those first 2 or 3 days are for the most part a blur because I was in so much pain in my head that I couldn't do
Yeah.
anything else.
And so after that, it was just those couple days, and after she gave you the medicine, it didn't really come back?
It didn't come back to that extent, no. For then it was Tylenol and ibuprofen, we're able to handle it.
Yeah.
Um, and so we're home, we don't leave, you can't really go anywhere besides doctor's appointments, and so we're like, "Okay, well, how do we get her to sleep?" Like, we know we're not supposed to sleep with her in the bed, but, like, I'm trying to nurse every 2 to 3 hours. And at this point, nursing is really hard. They barely have lactation consultants. So they have one in the office, but it's a little harder to like see them and figure out. So ultimately, we stopped nursing if she was losing weight too fast. And we're like, okay, well, we'll use formula, which is great. And it worked. I continued to try to pump for probably 2 or 3 months. And I was like, I'm not. This is more stress than it's worth. We can't leave the house to get help. I don't want to bring anybody into the house to come and help me right now because we know so much today about COVID, but at that point, didn't know anything about this
Right.
thing. Because this is like, we're only 3 months into the pandemic at this point. You can't go to the grocery store. You can't, like, we're still really early at this point in time.
So once she switched to formula, were you just able to kind of have a mental clarity and like kind of enjoy postpartum a little bit more?
For the most part. So there was this weird thing when she'd breathe, it sounded like if you put pennies in a jar and shook them up. And so we're freaking out. She also has a tongue tie. So all of this is happening when we can barely go to doctor's appointments. We did get her tongue tie fixed and clipped in the pediatrician's office. But then you're also like, hey, she's breathing funny. And they're like, yeah, that's called laryngomalacia. And I'm like, what? I don't even know what that means. They're like, she'll grow out of it. And I was like, yeah, but like this little tiny baby is breathing funny. Am I just supposed to like let her do that? And they're like, yeah, she'll grow. Well, at this point, you can't sleep in your crib because I need you next to me because I need to be able to see what's happening at all times. She grew out of it at like 8 months, but like I still have videos in my phone and I'm like, she sounded rough.
Yeah, that's so scary. If it's like, is she breathing okay? I feel like new moms stare at
Yes.
their baby's breathing anyways, but add that on top of it, like that is nerve-wracking.
Yes. And over time, as I look in like Facebook groups and additional research, it could have been caused by the vacuum, but the world will never know. It doesn't bother her
Yeah.
anymore.
Awesome. So, as you kind of go through postpartum, when did y'all decide that you wanted to start trying for your second?
So we always knew eventually we wanted 2 kids. Like no matter what, we at least a minimum wanted two. If we had 2 girls, then we may try for a third. And so that didn't happen. And if I'm being honest, I very much wanted my youngest was very much a surprise child. So you go through losing weight. So at this point, I've lost almost 200 pounds, and surprise, there's a baby. And they kind of warn you of this when you go through. So I had weight loss surgery, and they do kind of warn you about this. Um, when you go through weight loss surgery, that you are significantly more fertile. And so here pops, hey, that is a positive pregnancy test. That's crazy.
And were you having regular cycles like at through your weight loss journey and it was just you missed a period to decide to test?
I started throwing up. At that point, I hadn't had a positive pregnancy test, but I was like randomly sick, and I was like, uh oh.
I know what this means.
Yes. And so I also had hyperemesis through his entire pregnancy. So there was no winning. But when we were really early on and my parents were like, hey, if you move back, we were living in South Carolina. And my mom told us, hey, if you move back, we'll be your nanny. And so at this point I had a new job where I was traveling a little bit more. And I was like, well, how am I gonna travel and we're gonna do this with 2 kids? And so I found out I was pregnant in October, went down, visited Georgia, and put an offer in on the house in November and moved in January. So when they said that, I was like, well, you can't really beat it. We have such a village here. So my parents are here. My mom keeps my youngest 5 days a week. My oldest goes as soon as she gets out of school until I go back and pick her up. And then while I was pregnant, they did all pick up for my oldest. And at this time, we didn't know that my oldest was special needs. We found out after we moved and had gotten settled. We're like, hey, and that's also part of COVID too, is she was very speech delayed. But they kept saying, nope, she's on track. She's on track. But at this point, you're not around anyone else. We're still remote. We got put on wait list for daycare while I was pregnant with her, but a lot of the daycares hadn't opened up again by the time she was born. And so she didn't start daycare until she was 1. And I was like, yeah, she doesn't talk like the other kids, but the doctors keep saying it's fine. And once we moved here, we slowly realized, nope, she's absolutely autistic. And so when she was 3, she was diagnosed while I was pregnant. And it made a whole lot more sense. And so being here helped a lot with that. And that second pregnancy was really smooth besides the hyperemesis, and I still took the exact same meds. I didn't do the IVs. I took the exact same meds with him. I was able to get into a doctor's office perfectly fine. Now, I mentioned earlier, and I said I'd circle back to it. When we were in South Carolina, I tried to go to a doctor, and they're like, well, because you saw maternal fetal medicine, we can't see you here. And I was like, even though I've lost all this weight, yep, nope, we can't see you. You'll have to go somewhere else. And I didn't go back to maternal fetal medicine. I found the doctor who delivered Logan, my oldest, and asked him if I could see their office still. And he was like, absolutely. And so I did see him up until we moved.
And he didn't have any concerns with not going to maternal fetal medicine?
None whatsoever. And so I saw the office that I saw here when we moved. I was like, is there concerns about my weight? And they were like, nope, we see, because at this point, I was still 400 plus pounds, because keeping in mind, at this point, after I had her, I had gained some more weight. So, I had weight loss surgery when she was 1, and I was like 570 when I had weight loss surgery. And so when I got pregnant with him, I was down to 390. So still very much what they would consider a high BMI pregnancy. Um, but they were like, nope, all is good. We'll continue to see you at this office when we move to Georgia, and had no concerns with them. Now, I did let the doctors know every time, I don't want a C-section unless we absolutely have to. And they were like, no, that makes perfect sense. Now, there are some differences when it comes to being a bariatric patient in pregnancy. So you are not allowed to take aspirin. So you can't take any NSAIDs if you've had weight loss surgery. It puts you at a higher risk of an ulcer. And so they're like, well, we do prefer preventative NSAIDs, but talk to your bariatric surgeon. And my surgeon was in agreement. The other thing is the glucose tests don't work the same. So your body doesn't absorb sugar. And so the alternative for that was, it was supposed to be 4 weeks of testing your blood sugar 3 times a day. And even though that came back fine, they're like, "No, let's just do it the whole pregnancy." And I was like, "I don't have gestational diabetes, but if you say so." So now I am forced the entire rest of the pregnancy to check my blood sugar every day. And there was never a increase. It was perfectly normal the entire time.
What trimester or what month did that start that you had to continue on?
I started at 12 weeks and had to do it the whole way
Wow.
through.
And that's so surprising because you would think like, okay, after a couple months of showing no signs of changes that they would let you stop.
I had to bring the papers
Wow.
every single doctor's appointment. And at this point, I no longer have AFib. My cardiologist has fully removed that from my record. Like, it's still like history, but like as a diagnosis, it's completely removed as a diagnosis. Everything is normal besides the constant throwing up. There were zero concerns his entire pregnancy. It was smooth. I take that back. It was April or March. She was born in June. And I was driving my little sister, who was 16 at the time, somewhere. And I was like, my stomach really hurts. And I'm a little dizzy. And I was like, hey, I'm going to just drive to urgent care. And I ended up having appendicitis. Nope, not appendicitis, pancreatitis.
Wow.
And pancreatitis and your gallbladder flare up is really common after extreme weight loss. And so I'm in the hospital for 3 days, not able to eat, pregnant. They're coming in to like check him every couple of hours, but I was only 20 weeks. It was 19 or 20 weeks. You only go to labor and delivery at this hospital if you're over 22 weeks. So I was on the regular floor, but then someone from the OB floor would just come and do the ultrasound. And like, well, we also want to do an x-ray. And I was like, hey, they tell you I'm pregnant. We probably shouldn't be doing an x-ray. And they're like, well, the risk of not doing it is higher than doing it. So we're going to do it. And it was so painful. And it was the gallbladder, which I got taken out when he was like 7 months old. I did end up having to get it removed altogether. But that was probably the only like issues with the pregnancy. And so now we're at, okay, we're going to schedule your induction. And I was like, why do we need an induction? They're like, well, you didn't go past 38 weeks last time. Let's do one at 38 weeks just to be careful so your blood pressure doesn't spike. And I was like, I guess. So we go in on the morning of Juneteenth, which I was actually really excited about. And so we check in at 5 a.m. At this point, when they check me, I'm already 4 centimeters and 50% effaced at check-in.
You were like, yes, this is a much better starting point.
I was like, it sounds like it's going to be today. And so by 8 o'clock that morning, so we checked in at 5. By 8, they broke my water by hand. We're already at a 5. And so I think I got the epidural at like 9 or 9:30. So we're 4.5 hours in. I was like, I can't take it anymore.
With your history of the last epidural and the doctor kind of fumbling that, were you nervous to get this epidural? Or at that point you were like, give me something, I don't care?
I was really nervous. And this sounds really bad and kind of ageist, but he was like really old. And I was really worried. I was like, his hand's going to shake. I'm like, this is okay. And it was flawless. He was in and out in like 5 minutes. It didn't take very long at all. I will say I couldn't feel my legs, which was strange because when I had my epidural with my daughter, I could still feel my legs. Like I was still able to move. I could not move. It was really strong. And
Yeah.
I was at a 10 by like 12 o'clock. So at this point, we checked in at 5. I'm at a 10 by 12. We didn't start pushing until almost 1 o'clock. And even then they were like, hold on, the doctor's across the street at the doctor's office. He's not in the hospital. And by 1:10, he was born. So we started pushing at like 12:50. By 1:10, he was here. The doctor walked in and barely had enough time to put his gloves on. I remember the nurse screaming at me, don't push, don't push. And I was like, I'm not pushing. It was the easiest delivery. It was so smooth. There were no tears. It was perfect.
So what was that immediate postpartum like compared to your daughter? Did they give him to you straight away as well?
I got him right away. We nursed right away. Almost immediately. Now he was super jaundiced. So the doctors were like, yeah, he has jaundice. They call it breast milk jaundice. And they were like really insistent. You got to do formula. You got to do formula. I was like, give me like a week. We'll figure it out. Give me like a week. And so at this point we triple fed. So he would nurse and then I'd give him a pumped bottle and then formula every 3 hours for almost 2 months until we fully got rid of the jaundice. Now, after that, he was fine. He nursed until he was almost 2. And so, but we had to get over the jaundice hump. But at this point, I could hire a lactation consultant to come and teach us how to do all the things.
Yeah, it was a lot more open than it was during the COVID area.
Yes, because at this point, I'm nursing, I'm giving him a bottle, then pumping. And then after that, it was nurse, give him pump milk, then go pump again. And so he was waking up every 2 hours because they were like, hey, you have to do every 2. At night, you can go 3. So for the first year and a half, even after we were done with formula, his body had automatically woken him up every 3 hours.
Gosh.
For like the first year of life, even after he didn't need to nurse, he was waking up every
Right.
3 hours.
Wow. How was that on your your overall postpartum journey?
Awful. Nursing was the hardest part with him because and I really wanted to get it done, but that was definitely the hardest part overall. Even the pumping of it. Until he was like a year and a half, he was still waking up to nurse every 3 hours. So at this point I learned like, okay, I'm gonna go back to sleep. So at this point I'm a working mom and travel for work very rarely, but early on, he was born in June, July, August, September, October. I had to go to a conference 4 months post-op, and I was speaking, so I had to be there in Salt Lake City. And so I tell them, "Okay, this is what I can do for you. I will fly in as early as possible Tuesday morning, but I'm leaving Wednesday night." And so I'm making this quick round trip because I'm like, I'm still having to pump on the plane and figure this out and try and understand how I'm supposed to do this whole thing. It was rough. And shortly after that, I had to go to Vegas for a conference. And luckily, the employer I worked with at the time had this program through this company called Maven. Maven is amazing. Maven ships your like this box with ice packs and bags directly to the hotel. You pump, you take the box back to the front desk, and every day they'll overnight it back home. And so I was in Vegas for a week at a conference, and every day I just overnight the milk back because I just made enough for him. I was a just enougher. So I needed that right back on my mom's porch the next morning. And she had formula if she needed it, but being able to overnight it back postpartum, at that point I was like 8 or 9 months postpartum, was like
Yeah.
really helpful and life-saving for me.
Yeah, that's a super cool program. We'll leave a link. You said it's called Maven?
Yes, and it was covered
Awesome.
through my insurance, so I'm not paying anything for this whatsoever. It's part of our benefits at work, and allowed me to kinda thrive in both the mom and the workspace, because to me, it is important to me that I am both of those people.
Mhm. Yeah, you don't lose yourself if the working side of you, that if that's something that you wanna continue doing, but you also can do what you wanna do as a mom as well. That's super special.
Yes.
Yeah, we will leave a link below, so if someone is in that same situation that they could potentially check that out with either their HR department or whoever handles their benefits. That's a really cool
Yes,
resource.
it was amazing benefit.
So I know there was a lot covered as far as both pregnancies. Did you have any specific resources or things that you went as far as books, podcasts, anything like that that you used during either pregnancy?
If I'm being honest, I was just winging it. I was out in these streets winging it because there are the challenges that come along with, hey, I need a nursing gown that's gonna fit me as a size 28, 30, and I will figure out who the brand is, because I see the logo. Oh, Dress to Deliver. There we go. That's the name of them. And they made mommy and me nursing gowns that went up to a size 32. And so I was able to wear it the whole time, and it unbuttons in the front and in the back for the epidural. And so the small things that like make you a little more comfortable, that it's hard to find in a larger body.
For sure. I also had a plus size like birth gown and I cannot recommend it enough versus like a scratchy tiny hospital gown, like actually being able to be comfortable in something that fits well.
Yes. I did not wear a hospital gown because I remember last time I was in the hospital, I had to wear 2 because they don't fit or you can't, like, quite move your arms in them, and so being able to be comfortable in that space was really important to me, and I didn't want a bariatric bed, and I think those are also things some people don't realize. So, hospitals have different bariatric beds if you're over a certain weight, and they're inflatable, and there's an air pump that keeps the air in the mattress on the bed frames. And so having the hospital be aware or that you may need that depending on what your size is, because
Yeah.
the regular beds are a lot smaller.
Yeah. And just to be able to know so you can ask for that if that's something, because being super uncomfortable in the in the labor space is not a fun thing and it can actually like hinder progression. So being able to ask for those things that do make the experience that's not going to be pleasant anyways a little more
Yes.
comfortable.
So calling in advance to ask about the weight limit on the birthing balls. So I did call beforehand, because some have a 300-pound weight limit or a 350-pound weight limit on the birthing balls.
Yeah, that's super good to know that people can ask that ahead of time and not to be afraid to ask that because of your weight or anything. Like you deserve to have a good experience and you deserve to have equipment that is going to be suitable for you no matter what size you are.
Yes, if you don't advocate, nobody else will. I mean, your spouse might, your doula might, but like even making sure that they're aware of those things in advance too.
Well, very cool, Nikki. I really appreciate you being so open about your full experience with both of your births. I know going from COVID birth and then your weight loss and then into your son's birth, being able to kind of have a little bit of a redemptive postpartum with that is super special. So I really appreciate you being open and sharing your story with us.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
I know you were sharing a little bit of your weight loss journey and your motherhood journey on social media. Do you want to share where people could find you?
Absolutely. So anything related to my weight loss is at Amazon Sleeved on TikTok and Instagram, and anything related to parenthood is Fat Positive Motherhood everywhere.
Awesome. We will definitely be sure to link those in the show notes as well. But thanks again, and we will talk to you next time, Nikki.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us. If you enjoyed this episode and want more stories just like this one, please be sure to like and follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, if you have a moment, please consider leaving us a positive review wherever you're listening to this show. These reviews are the best way for the algorithm to push out our show and get us in front of other plus-size moms who may be looking for a community like this one. Your kind words can help make sure that no one has to go through this journey alone. If you are a fellow plus-size mom and would be interested in sharing your story, please reach out to us at biggerthanbirthpodcast@gmail.com. Use the subject line "Share My Story" and I will be sure to get back to you as soon as possible. Want to put a face to a voice? Head over to any of our social media pages linked in the show notes below to see more photos of today's guest. Any resources or topics discussed in today's episodes will also be linked below. Thanks again for being a part of the Bigger Than Birth community, and we will see you next week. Bye!